Most people at 27 were preoccupied with establishing their careers, forming romantic relationships, or perhaps even organizing their next major excursion. Me? I was keeping everything together. For everybody, my phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking the moment of silence I had managed to capture in my small flat. Mom! I looked at the screen. I felt my gut tighten. Before I ever picked up, I understood what this was about. With the typical blend of expectation and remorse, my mother's voice crackled through the line, "Hillary, sweetheart." Today, Katie's therapy bill arrived. I squeezed the bridge of my nose and exhaled slowly. "Mom, how much this time?" Like she often did, she hesitated for a moment, as though feigning reluctance would make the request any less necessary. The number was hardly audible to me. It made no difference. My fingers were already clicking automatically as I opened my banking app. How did we arrive here? It was just exhausting, nothing complicated. It all began with my older sister, Katie. Though you wouldn't know it, they are 3 years older and apparently wiser. My parents had always lavished their affection on her, making her the ideal child. They saw her landing her ideal position at a large corporate company as the pinnacle of our family's accomplishments. When I began my career in marketing after graduating from college and established my own business, was there any acknowledgement? Hardly a nod of recognition. However, everything changed with Katie's career setback, as my mother tactfully phrased it. In fact, Katie had completely destroyed herself. She had applied for a promotion, and when it was offered to someone else, she didn't simply take it personally. She ruined all relationships. It's unbelievable that they chose Brianna over me. That night, her whole body shook with rage as she sobbed onto my shoulder. Do you know how long I was employed there? How much did I give that business? I had attempted to reassure her, assuring her that one rejection did not define her and that she would get back on her feet. Give her a few weeks, I thought. She'll get a job elsewhere. She will recover. 14 months have passed since then. Katie allowed herself to fall apart rather than move on. She moped for 7 months, scrutinizing every aspect of her alleged betrayal. After that, she spent 7 more months job hunting, which really meant rejecting every job that came up because nothing was good enough for her. And I was the one who kept everything afloat through it all. In order to keep everyone else's lives comfortable, I worked long hours at my firm to pay for her therapy expenses, my parents' mortgage, and their groceries. Every time I hesitated to send another bank transfer, my mother would add, "She's making real progress. Advancement?" The only thing moving from where I was my savings account, which was rapidly declining. I spent more than a year watching Katie sit on the couch at our childhood home, looking through job advertisements with unrealistic expectations, while doing nothing. As she waited for some ideal job that didn't exist, one with 5-day weekends and unlimited vacation time, she rejected opportunity after opportunity. I was drowning in the meantime. I was aware that everyone needed something to anticipate a respite, a cause for joy. I got the concept for Rome at that point. We embarked on a journey together, just Dad, Mom, and me. No worries, no money leaking, no Katie, just a way out. I worked on creating the ideal itinerary for weeks. Private excursions, hand-picked experiences, and the nicest accommodations. We are planning a cheese tasting trip for Mum, who has always wanted to try real Italian cheeses. Dad never refused a good glass of red wine, so this was a vineyard outing for him. What about me? A few days of tranquility, free from the burden of a family who hardly recognized my sacrifices, expenses, and treatment appointments. I felt hopeful for the first time in a very long time. I had no notion that that hope would soon be cruelly twisted by life. I remember having a lot of last-minute information and travel arrangements in my thoughts as I drove to a client. The following one? A loud collision. The crunch of metal. Terrible. Then, nothing. An intense, pulsating ache that radiated from every part of my body was the first thing I noticed. I blinked against the fluorescent lights above me, my eyes feeling like lead as I pushed them open. Where had I gone? Everything became clear when a heart monitor began to beep steadily. A medical facility. It was difficult for my intellect to put things together. Driving was the last thing I recalled doing. A meeting with a client. Then there was the accident. While changing something close to the fourth, a nurse hovered over me. "You're conscious," she replied softly. "Be patient, my love." I attempted to talk, but every breath felt like swallowing glass fragments due to my wounded throat. What happened? At last, I was able to speak, hardly raising my voice beyond a whisper. Her tone was deliberately neutral as she said, "You were in an accident. The surgery went well, although you had some inside injuries. You're quite fortunate." She trailed off, checking my vitals, but the airbag bore the brunt of the crash. My mind struggled to comprehend the surgical procedure. They had operated because I had been unconscious long enough. At that moment, my parents and Katie entered via the open door. Despite the burning sensation in my chest, I exhaled with a sense of relief. At last, family, assistance, comfort. But I had a strange feeling as I took them in. Mom was standing there with her travel purse, the pricey one she had purchased especially for our trip to Rome. Behind her, Dad's face was unreadable. Katie's face was already irritated as she crossed her arms. A knot of uneasiness twisted in my gut. With my voice still hurting, I croaked, "I'm so sorry. The trip will need to be rescheduled. We can go when I feel better, and I'll cancel everything for today." I anticipated pity, worry, perhaps disappointment, but at least comprehension. Rather, Mom cocked her head, fiddling with her purse's strap. "Oh, my love, there's no need to cancel." I blinked. "What?" Mom and Dad looked at each other, and Dad just nodded. "I discussed it with your father," she added in an unsettlingly composed tone. "We still believe we should go. Continue?" I must have heard it wrong. My head had to be affected by the painkillers. She touched Katie's shoulder before I had a chance to inquire. "Instead, we're taking Katie." The force that had broken my car was not as strong as the words. Mom simply grinned at Katie as if it were the most natural thing in the world, while I gazed at them, expecting someone to laugh or tell me this was a joke. She said, in a tone that was almost compassionate, "She's had a rough year. This break is much needed by her." My mouth opened, but nothing came out. With her arms folded, Katie stepped forward. "We expected you to monitor the house while we were away," she casually said. "You'll need to hire someone since you can't. Verify their dependability." I went cold. I had just about made it out of an automobile accident. After surgery, I lay in a hospital bed. Additionally, my dad and other family members were discussing taking a vacation. I had planned the vacation for months, the journey I funded, and they had just taken my spot. As if I were an expendable extra. My chest constricted, not because of my wounds, but because I was choking on incredulity. Then, they bid each other farewell with a genuine wave, as if it came naturally to them. Dad nodded stiffly, Mom rearranged her pocketbook, and Katie grinned. After that, they left. As simple as that. I was left alone with the heart monitor's chilly, steady beeping as the door snapped shut behind them, left behind. For a vacation I had organized, for a vacation I had funded, for her. In an attempt to comprehend what had just transpired, I lay there looking up at the ceiling. My physical suffering was lessened by the medications, but they were unable to alleviate this. This new discomfort, the one with nothing to do with sutures or shattered bones. Upon realizing that I had never truly been their top focus, that is, not once, the footsteps of a nurse stopped at my doorway as she went past. She looked at my face, then at my monitor. "Is everything well, my love?" Her voice softened with concern as she asked. My throat was raw as I swallowed. I ought to have declined. Instead, though, a thought occurred to me. My mobile phone. My voice was scratchy but solid as I rasped. "My phone. Will you please take my phone?" She nodded, vanished for a few minutes, and then reappeared with a hospital bag made of clear plastic. I opened it with shaking hands and was glad to see the screen was still there. My former lock screen, which was a Christmas picture of my parents and me, was still visible when it lit up. I set the default wallpaper instead, I opened my email after that. All of my reservations and confirmations, including those for hotels, excursions, and return flights, were still in my travel folder. I went through them with a sly sneer curling my lips. They could treat me more like a travel agent than a daughter if they so desired. All right, I would pretend to be one. I began cancelling things one by one. With a few finger strokes, I watched each reservation go as I gently breathed. They disappeared, one by one. First, the hotel, the stunning suite, overlooking the Monumento del Vittoriano, was no longer there. The private tours come next. Mum's special tasting of cheese, cancelled. Dad's trip to the vineyard, lost. The art museum's personal guide? The river trip on the Tiber at sunset? The Vatican's skip the line passes? Completely destroyed. I experienced an odd spectrum of feelings with each cancellation. Sadness. I had pictured myself having these experiences with them, witnessing their smiles, and enjoying the excitement of discovering a new location with them. But there was something sharper underneath it. It had a strong sense of fairness. They treated my accident as if it were a minor inconvenience. They treated me as if I were merely a barrier to their plans. They had picked Katie above me, even though she hadn't done anything or given a dime for more than a year. As I lay in a hospital bed, everyone had left. They had abandoned me to enjoy a trip that I had paid for, and now that was what they were going to experience. I went to the last reservation by scrolling down. Their flights back. I drew my finger over the cancel button. A tiny, trivial part of me pondered their expressions upon realizing they would have to find their own way home. I pictured them stranded, in a panic, frantically attempting to fix an issue they hadn't even anticipated, trying to rebook tickets at the last minute. I clicked it after taking a final, contented breath. Lost. Rome was yet to receive them. However, they lacked a hotel. No tours, no turning back. I closed my eyes, placed my phone face down on the bedside table, and turned it to mute. Soon enough, they would learn the truth. They might experience that initial flash of dread over the Atlantic. Perhaps they would finally know what it was like to be abandoned when they arrived in Rome without a hotel, no scheduled activities, and no means of transportation, to be left behind, to be a last-minute idea. At 3:25 a.m., the first communication arrived. My phone lit up in the dark and buzzed quietly on the table. They must have just gotten there and attempted to check into the hotel that didn't exist. Despite the persistent discomfort in my ribs, I shifted slightly in bed and grinned. I had 15 missed calls by breakfast, 40 by lunchtime. My screen was overflowing with messages, one after the other, and I hardly had time to take them all in. I took out my hospital food menu and began making a tally on the back for amusement. Unanswered calls? Mum, 25 father, 18 Katie, really? 48, 48, 48? There are currently 50 text messages, 21 voicemails. My lips curled into a grin as I quietly laughed. They were desperate now. They now had a pressing issue that may blow up a hospital patient's phone. I finally picked up my phone when the number reached 51. The stitches pulled when I shifted slightly in bed, and I grimaced, but it was worth it. At the top were Katie's messages. Katie 10:07 am. How could you have been so self-centered and cruel? We have nowhere to go and are stuck in the hotel lobby. So callous. I continued to peruse while rolling my eyes. Mom 10:12 am. I'm very disappointed in you, Hillary. We don't treat family like this. This is the first time we have ever done this to one another. I gave a snort. Never engaged in such behavior with one another? Correct, because apparently it didn't count to leave your injured daughter alone in a hospital to enjoy a vacation she paid for. Dad 10:19 am. Give me a call. Take care of this right away. Your mom is in tears. I shook my head and laughed. The texts continued to arrive more quickly than I could read them. Mom, we can't check in at the hotel. Where's our reservation, Dad? What do you mean, Katie, that you cancelled the flights back? Mom, get on the phone. A shadow moved across my bed while I was scrolling through one of Katie's more offensive messages. I raised my head. With his arms folded and his face impassive, Dr. Olivier stood in the doorway. My fingertips lingered on the screen as I froze. Busted. Your phone has been ringing for hours, Miss Wilson, he observed, arching an eyebrow. This isn't a call center. This is a hospital. All of our patients need to be in a calm setting. My cheeks turned red with shame. I apologize, doctor. It's simply, the entire tale came out before I even knew it. The mishap. I had organized and funded the vacation to Rome. I was lying in a hospital bed when my family abandoned me. How I had cancelled everything in exchange. As he listened, Dr. Olivier's face changed from one of worry to one of astonishment. Just then my phone buzzed once more. The name of Mom appeared on the screen. Dr. Olivier took it up immediately. He said, "Hello, this is Dr. Olivier from Memorial Hospital," in a formal, clipped voice. "I must request that you cease your calls. Your daughter is about to have a second surgery and needs to relax." I could hear my mother's piercing, angry voice even from the opposite side of the room. "No operation matters to me," she yelled. "Now put my kid on the phone." She must make amends for what she has done to us. Dr. Olivier's expression grew gloomy. Shock comes first, then utter incredulity. And lastly, rage. He hung up without saying anything more and put my phone in his pocket. He firmly stated, "I'll be holding on to this until after your surgery. Whatever this is, you must concentrate on healing." The room became quiet for the first time in days. And in spite of everything, despite my so-called family's mishap, treachery, and blatant insolence, for the first time in a long time, I felt something, calm. Everything was a jumble of painkillers, fatigue, and the constant beeping of equipment over the following few days. I didn't know what was going on in Rome without my phone. And truthfully, I didn't care. No frantic texts, guilt-tripping calls, or demands for more money were heard for the first time in years. Only me. Just tranquility. Then life decided to throw a curveball in, as it often does. Knock, knock. A recognizable voice intruded through the doorway on the 4th day after the procedure. "We brought contraband." I blinked in amazement as I gently turned my head. Marketing's Corinne appeared in the doorway, grinning mischievously. She displayed a brown paper bag as though it held a secret treasure. With 2 steaming cups of coffee from the cafe down the street, Nick from accounting appeared next to her. Actual coffee. Not the dead, bland type the hospital provided. My throat tightened as I stared at them. "Shocked," I said in a raspy voice. "What are you guys doing here?" All Corinne could do was roll her eyes. "Oh, please. Like we'd let you rot in here alone." She dropped the bag on my nightstand. "You take care of everyone at work, Hillary. Now it's our turn." James and Brittany from my team showed up the following day, armed with office gossip and magazines. My cousin Mary, whom I hadn't seen in months, arrived the following day carrying a container of homemade soup. By the end of the week, visitors weren't limited to friends and co-workers. My people were involved, the ones who had been there all along, the ones that, while I was busy giving my everything to a family that never gave back, I had been too tired to truly appreciate. With a smile, Brittany displayed a well-structured, color-coded spreadsheet on her tablet. She declared, "We've got a system with pride. Someone from the office is dropping by every day. We cannot allow our best project manager to feel isolated." My eyes began to brim up with tears. "You guys didn't have to do this." James dismissed my complaint with a wave. "After all the times you've had our backs? This is nothing." Mr. Ryan, my employer, even gave me a personal call. There was an odd tenderness in his normally rough voice. "Hillary, don't stress about work. The accident happened on company time, so our insurance has you covered. You'll get a favorable payout. It should help with the recovery and then some." Startled, I blinked. I hadn't experienced someone doing something for me without asking anything in return for a long time. "Doctor." Olivier came in and carefully set my phone on my bedside table after I had been without it for 5 days. "I think you're strong enough to handle this now," he stated. "But I wouldn't blame you if you left it off a little longer." I picked it up after hesitating. As the screen came to life, my hands began to shake a little. A total of 125 calls were lost. Voicemails, dozens, many texts. I went to the first page, like a distorted version of the 5 stages of grieving. The messages had undergone stages of development. 1. Desperation. Please, Hillary, you need to see things from our perspective. We are related. We can resolve this. 2. Guilt trips. How could you harm us like this? Are you aware of the humiliating nature of this? 3. Fury. This is not the kind of treatment we deserve. 4. Panic, unadulterated. We're stranded in a hellhole you won't believe, Katie swore. Bedbugs are present. On a cot, Dad is asleep. At night, we hear gunshots. 5. The most theatrical guilt trip. Mom, we hardly have enough money for food. Like beggars, we live off the street sellers. We haven't taken any tours. Was this what you were hoping for? To inflict pain on your own parents? Lastly, the most recent message was an order rather than a request. Reserve our return flights right away. Otherwise, a series of violent yet ambiguous threats followed. I flipped my phone face down on my plate and moaned. Just as expected, there came a knock on the door again. A smuggled bag of cookies and a deck of cards were held up by Sophie from HR. As she peered in, she smiled as she asked, "Ready to learn poker?" I took a look at my phone, then back at her, and I decided something. I switched the phone off entirely. Then I grinned. Deal me in. In fact, I was enjoying my day when they interrupted. For the first time since the accident, I felt a glimmer of pride after my physical therapist concluded our session. I had successfully taken a few steps by myself. Then I heard it. The distinct sound of bags moving on linoleum, a warning of half a second before the storm arrived. They stormed like a hurricane into my hospital room. You dare! Mom's travel clothes were crumpled from the lengthy flight, and her face was a mask of anger. With a glare that could break glass, Katie pulled a sleek, high-end luggage right after her. The irony? Last Christmas, I had purchased the suitcase for her. Dad lingered at the doorway, caught between embarrassment and rage. Nurse Kate, who had been adjusting the 4th, moved neatly between them and my bed, with her arms crossed before I could even open my mouth. With a stern tone, she commanded, "Lower your voices. This is not a circus tent. This is a hospital." They were indifferent. They didn't. Katie's frustration, which had been building for 3 weeks, suddenly burst forth like a dam. "She's doing just fine here," she said, spreading her arms wide as if my private hospital room were a 5-star resort. "Observe her!" While we suffered, we ate 3 times a day and slept in a clean bed. Something broke inside of me. Perhaps my normal discipline was dulled by the medications. Perhaps I had had enough. I carefully turned to face her while speaking in a low voice that was piercing enough to cut through the atmosphere. Suffered? There was silence. I let out a breath as a cold silence descended upon me. "How about we discuss suffering?" Nobody said anything. "I worked myself into the ground for the past year," I added, my voice growing stronger. "I paid the bills. I purchased the groceries. While you sat at home rejecting every job because none of them were good enough, I took care of your therapy appointments, Katie." I raised a hand, but Mom's mouth opened. "No, not now. It is not your place to interrupt me." I inhaled deeply. This journey was a present. I planned it for months. I covered the cost. I paid for every last cent myself. After that, I had an accident. Required urgent surgery. "What did you do too?" I left the question open-ended. "Did you see how I was doing?" Inquire as to my well-being. Quiet. "No," I replied, my voice freezing. "You took my trip instead. You forced Katie, who hasn't given this family a dime in over a year, to go on the trip I had paid for. This could have been our only opportunity." Then my own sister Katie struck the last blow. She gave a shrug. In addition, she remarked nonchalantly, "What if the accident left you disabled?" "You would have cancelled everything then, for sure." I persuaded Mom and Dad to go while it was still covered because of this. The room fell silent. Mom appeared astounded as well. A sluggish, creeping numbness descended upon me. As I grabbed for the call button, my fingers shook. the intercom in the hospital crackled. "Please, security. I need my room escorted by 4 people." Among them, one moved forward. "After undergoing extensive surgery, this patient is recuperating. I will have to request that you leave." They were marched out, and I watched. Mom's irate voice reverberated down the corridor. Dad could have made an apology, but his silence said more. As they vanished from view, Katie's protests became less audible, and they were gone in an instant. I did something the following morning that I ought to have done long ago. I blocked their phone numbers, each and every one. Mom, Dad, Katie. For a single second longer than the rest, my finger paused over Dad's contact. However, his silence had ultimately proven as incriminating as their treachery. I then launched my financial applications. I stopped all the automatic payments I had set up for them. One by one, Katie's therapy won't get any additional funding. No more paying for their utilities. No more transferring groceries. I felt weightless when I was finished, as if I'd finally laid down a weight I'd been bearing for too long. I was able to breathe for the first time in years. I was released 3 weeks later. I had the impression that I had entered a sanctuary when I first entered my residence. Everything had been handled by my co-workers. They had done the cleaning, stocked the refrigerator, arranged fresh flowers on the counter as well. No family strife. Don't feel guilty. No financial leaks. Just tranquility. I plunged into recuperation. I went about my physical treatment regimen. I gradually returned to working remotely. Life found a rhythm, slowly but certainly. For once, the beat wasn't about cleaning up my family's mess. Then, a month or so after I left the hospital, my phone exploded with messages from distant relatives and cousins. Mom shared her heartbreaking tale on Facebook. "My own daughter has abandoned us in our time of need. After everything we've done for her, she's turned her back on her poor, struggling parents. She said that because I didn't answer their calls, I was the bad guy. Unaware of the true scenario, some of her friends showered the comments with condolences. How terrible, considering all that you have done for her. In every situation, family should come first." Oh, I was about to delete the app, thinking it was simply another way to manipulate me. Then, however, a fresh statement surfaced. This one is from Mary, my cousin. "Aunt Linda, are you really portraying yourself as the victim?" Then the floodgates suddenly opened. A fresh comment appeared just as I was ready to exit the program, writing it off as just another manipulation technique. This one is from Mary, my cousin. "Aunt Linda, are you really portraying yourself as the victim?" It was like a match dropped into gasoline as those words appeared on the screen. "After Hillary's accident, you left her in the hospital so you could go on the trip she paid for. You took Katie instead of being there for your injured daughter. The truth is known to all of us." Mary didn't hold back. And just like that, the floods began to flow. Family members spoke forward one by one, revealing everything. How, for a year, I provided all of our parents' financial support while Katie refused to find employment. How I had organized and funded the Rome trip, which was intended as a present. How they had paid me a visit in the hospital while my own parents were traveling throughout Europe for sightseeing. Every remark was a harsh reality check for Mom. She removed the post 3 days later. However, it was already too late. The family group chat has already begun to circulate screenshots. Her little show of sympathy had gone horribly wrong. Her well-crafted narrative abruptly collapsed. I entered my office without a cane for the first time 4 months after the accident. I walked steadily and had excellent posture. Each exhausting session of physical therapy had paid off. I thought the first day back would be peaceful, with perhaps a little banter near the coffee maker. Rather, as I entered, my whole staff was huddled around my desk, a huge cake in the middle. "Hillary, welcome back!" As soon as I entered the office, everybody applauded. The sight of the cake brought me to a halt. Delicate fondant blossoms adorned 3 sophisticated layers of chocolate and vanilla. And right at the top, standing tall, unshaken, is a little figurine of a woman. My chest constricted. My throat ached. You guys, I began, but my feelings overcame me. While Nick got a knife and started carving the cake, Kareen pulled me into a cozy embrace. Oh, and you were the target of this. I was given an envelope by Brittany. I gave the sender a quick look. My insurance provider. I ripped it open with trembling hands. And as soon as my gaze touched the settlement sum, I almost dropped the letter. More zeros than I ever thought possible. That evening, I opened my laptop while eating a piece of leftover cake while seated cross-legged on my couch. I began looking through travel websites. Rome. The screen flickered to the same opulent hotel I had previously reserved. I checked availability for the next 4 months without hesitation. This time, only one room. I clicked book now with a sneer on my lips. I then made reservations for the tours, the tasting of the cheese, the trip to the vineyard, the guide to the private art museum. All of them. Unmarried. One. However, this time, no concessions, no commitments. Don't be a freeloader. It was only me, experiencing the journey as I had imagined. My phone began to vibrate. My family is trying again. Mom texted. Dad left a voicemail. Katie's email. They had even sent a beautiful bouquet to my flat earlier that week. It fell directly into the trash can. It was an unidentified number that sent the last message. It's Mom, Hillary. Talk to us, please. We remain family. I took a moment to look at the message. Then, without thinking, I hit erase. I returned my attention to my laptop and observed the flood of confirmation emails, lodging, airplanes, excursions. However, in contrast to earlier, my chest was free of tension. No nervousness nagging at the corners of my thoughts. This journey? No one else was at issue. No concessions. No commitments. Only me. A slow, satisfied smile came across my face. I flipped through the old family photos I had held on to for too long after opening my photo gallery. I erased them one by one, because occasionally, your birth family isn't the one that counts most. It's the one you construct. Companions. Colleagues. Good people who come through when it counts. That was a lesson I had to learn the hard way. And I was convinced of one thing as I stood there, gazing into the future. I will always remember this trip. The days flew by in a haze of expectation. Without them, I put myself into my career, my recuperation, and my life, and the burden on my chest decreased with each week that went by. Rome in 3 months. I let the idea simmer in my chest like a hot fire. I was planning something for myself for the first time in a very long time. No family strife, no drains of money, have no expectations. A city that had always been my fantasy, and just me. The phone then rang. Unknown number. I already knew, so I sighed. They had returned. I allowed it to ring. Once more it buzzed. And once more, till, at last, I took it up. This is Dad, said Hillary. His voice lacked its characteristic dominating tone and was quieter than normal. I remained silent. He let out a long sigh. Look, I know things have been rough. I laughed a little dryly. Hard? I said it again. I paid for this trip, and you left me in a hospital bed, Dad. A pause occurred. We did something wrong. An error. What a slap in the face of desertion. Then the worst part arrived. Your mum is not feeling well. She has been quite anxious. Katie as well, naturally. It's not an apology. No, Hillary, how are you? Do you not require anything? Mom and Katie alone, as though they could still rely on me as a bank account in times of need. I waited to see how far he would push it, so I let the stillness last. We need help, sweetheart. I was numb. Help. My heart used to ache for that word. I used to dive right in without thinking twice. No more. Hillary, your mother is begging you to come home. To fix this. I shook my head and let out a breath. Is she requesting that I clean up the mess she created? He sounded strained now, as though he knew I wouldn't give in. We remain family. It was there, the card of manipulation. It was their final trick. Calm and confident, I exhaled deeply. No, Dad. Quiet. Hillary, no. One more pause. He was obviously trying to find the appropriate words, but he was at a loss. No more. His voice returned at last. a little softer and defeated. I see. He hung up after that. Staring at the television, I sat there, awaiting the onset of guilt, for the familiar old pull of duty. However, nothing was present, just a strange, profound silence, as if the last remnant of a tempest had passed, as if I had at last been set free. Rome in 2 months. I looked at my email. Everything was in place. A ticket in first class. Only for me. For me, a hotel suite. The best trip of my life, the best experiences, the best reservations. No conditions, not guilty, no leeches. In the life I created for me, only myself. Furthermore, I wasn't turning around. Rome, the city of my dreams, appeared as the jet landed with a soft thud, and the sound of the engine slowed. I let out a breath and gingerly pressed my forehead on the cool window. I succeeded, not only to this location but also to escape the disaster they left me in. Now, this was my journey. It was my turn, my new beginning, and I felt free for the first time in years. I was touched by the warm Italian sun as soon as I left the airport. No desperate calls. Don't send frantic SMS. Nobody is attempting to steal from me. Me in a city that is just waiting to be discovered. Even more stunning than the photos was the opulent hotel I had reserved. White linens that are soft. A balcony with a distant view of the Colosseum. For me only, a deep soaking tub. I smiled and stretched my arms out before sinking onto the soft bed. It should have been this way from the beginning. When I strolled around the Piazza Navona that evening, the fountains and cobblestone streets were bathed in a warm glow from the sunset's golden rays. I took my time, allowing the world to settle down around me as I sipped a deep, creamy espresso. No demands were made. Have no expectations, no responsibilities. Just the smell of freshly baked bread, the sound of laughing, and the silent satisfaction that comes from being just where I belong. I saw couples griping about their itinerary, families fussing over dining options, and visitors arguing over maps as I strolled throughout the city. I grinned as well, because I was no longer a problem for anyone. I had nothing to correct for anyone. I was merely surviving. They were probably still waiting for me to give in when I thought about them back home. They're still waiting on Hillary to convince them to do everything for them. However, is that Hillary? She was no longer there. My phone then buzzed. Unknown number. For a moment I gazed at it. Then, grinning, I switched off my phone, because my life was mine this time.